Okay, in this video, we are going to go through display settings, and this is going to be quite difficult for me because, first of all, my screen capture software can only capture my current display, and also I'm currently only working on a single display. And a lot of what I want to talk about is a multi-display setup and how to set that up and why it can be beneficial for you. And as such, I've downloaded a couple images just off of Google Image to show, but you'll have to just kind of experiment on your own and follow along with my explanation and see how it works for you, because I cannot demonstrate it exactly just on a single screen setup. So the first thing that we need to talk about is what is a monitor, or what is a display. So anything that displays an image is considered a display, right? So your laptop has a built-in display. That is a computer monitor. As according to the computer's brain, it doesn't know the difference between a laptop screen, a projector, and a monitor. Those things are all the same to it. It is a display output. It is taking an image and putting it out towards a display. So it could be a projector, it could be an external monitor, it could be a wireless monitor, it could be a TV, or it could be your laptop screen. Those are all display outputs, right? And they come in different sizes, and the size of a display is unrelated to its resolution. So the physical size, the dimensions of the physical product is only half of the story. The second half of the story is the display resolution. And so I'm just quickly going to pop open a Google search result and show you common display resolutions. This is just the first Google search result I've hit on. And so these dimensions that you are seeing are the common ones. And trust me, you don't need to memorize or learn all of this. This is just it's just to basically understand the concept. And so what we are looking at here with these dimensions is essentially width by height measured in pixels. And so what is a pixel? Well, inside your screen, inside any display, is a tiny dot. And it mixes colors of light together to produce a particular color. And that particular dot lights up with a particular color many times every second. And you multiply that across the width of your monitor and across the height of your monitor, and you get a moving digital image. And so the most common size of displays today that you should be aware of, especially for computers, is the one that I've just highlighted here, 1920 by 1080. You will hear this number quite a lot, and that is because it is a very, very common standard size for monitors and for computers, screens, laptop screens, and so on. Phone screens are a bit different. There's a lot of different variation within phone screens these days. And older projectors will tend to be smaller than this, and older screens will tend to be smaller than this. One thing I would implore everybody to do not buy a computer or a monitor or a projector or a laptop with a display resolution less than this. This is the current minimum. In fact, it might soon be outdated, but you should definitely not, in 2020, you should never be buying anything less than this. It's just too low resolution, too low quality, and even the cheapest computers nowadays can come with this resolution screen. So this resolution, 1920, 1920 pixels wide by 1080 pixels tall, this is called Full HD or FHD. So you will often see this written as FHD display or FHD. And it just so happens to have an aspect ratio of 16 by 9. So over here is the aspect ratio, which is essentially comparing the width to the height. And so 16 by 9 is another familiar number that I want you guys to just keep in the back of your mind, because it is a very common aspect ratio for many different things. And that is from PowerPoint presentations to Facebook banner images, for events, for all sorts of different things. This is an important aspect ratio to keep in the back of your mind. Another thing I'd like to point out is that while there are plenty of random complicated resolutions below it, This is another important resolution that I would like to point out that is also the exact same aspect ratio. And what I mean by that is if you took this image and you scaled it up perfectly without changing the aspect ratio, without changing the dimensions in relation to each other, you would end up with this pixel ratio. It's also 16:9 aspect ratio, and this measures 3,840 pixels by 2160 pixels. What you are looking at there is 4K. I know it's not quite 4,000. 4K is 4,000. It's 3,840. So this is a little bit under 4K, but this is UHD, so Ultra HD. And this is a very standardized 4K resolution. There are other 4K resolutions out there, right, that are actually over 4,000 pixels, but this one is the more common and the more standardized one. Because again, it's that popular 16:9 aspect ratios. Okay? So it's important to understand pixels and aspect ratios, but the understanding the numbers, the key numbers to be aware of is this one right here, 1920 by 1080, because that is the one that you're going to see most often, and that is the one that you should be most aware of. I constantly forget exactly what the resolution of this 4K is, even though my camera films at this at this resolution. I constantly forget it because I've spent so many years dealing with 1920 by 1080. All right. The last thing I want to show you guys is not so much a resolution, but an aspect ratio, and that is 4:3. Now, the reason 4:3 is an important aspect ratio is because almost every camera on Earth, by default, will take pictures in the 4:3 aspect ratio. It is a very, very standardized format for photography, for photographs, and that is true of digital cameras and, real old-fashioned cameras as well. And so all of these resolutions that you see here are 4:3 aspect ratio resolutions. And your camera might, some of these advanced Canons and Nikons have like 8,000 pixels by something, but the aspect ratio of the image would still be a 4:3 aspect ratio image. So it's not going to fit onto a 16:9 screen without some scaling or cropping. So it's important to understand what is an aspect ratio, what is a display, what's a pixel, and so on. So, here we go. Here's some nice, useful terms. When you see I and P, that's not actually so important for understanding the difference of anything. In short, interlaced, I stands for interlaced, which means you're actually only seeing half of the pixels at the same time. So there's two lines that are interlaced together. As imagine if you interlaced your fingers together. That's actually what you're seeing. It's just flickering so fast that your eyes can't really see it. However, interlace technology is almost gone. I haven't seen any monitors or cameras that film using interlace technology in a long time. It's pretty old-fashioned. Almost everything these days is P, progressive, which means it's showing you all of the pixels all of the time. It's not flashing between half of them. So almost everything these days is going to be measured in 1080p pixels. 1080p, which stands for progressive. So you don't need to worry about that, but that's what those I and P stand for. All right, I'm going to close that, and we're going to go ahead and open our display setting. And so to do that, the first thing you're going to do is right-click and click on Display Setting. Okay? Now, normally, I don't know why mine isn't doing it, but normally you would see a picture of your current display right there at the top. I cannot for the life of me figure out why that is. It might have something to do with this being a work-based Windows license, but I'm not sure. And so as such, I also have downloaded an image that I want to show you guys, and this is probably more what you're looking at. There we go. So you guys should be seeing something like what I'm showing here on the right, right? And so this the image that you see at the top will show you a monitor with a number, and it might show you two monitors with two numbers. And then you have all of these options to adjust. And so I'll just go through a few quick things. So firstly, the night light is just going to put a red filter onto it, which is basically going to be softer on your eyes. So I don't know if the screen capture is showing that, but it's actually, this is great if you're doing a lot of work, a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and you don't want to damage your eyes. I actually use this feature a lot, and I have it automatically set to turn on at a certain time in the evening. It's basically filtering out the blue light, which keeps you awake. If your computer has a sensor, you can actually set that up to do it automatically. Mine does not. We're going to not talk about HDR because most people don't need to worry about that. HDR stands for high dynamic range, and you need a very particular monitor, and you also need content that is filmed in HDR, so not so important to understand. Now this is text scaling, and this can be quite useful when you are doing a presentation or plugging your computer into another display that is physically a different size. I'll give you an example. If you plug into a projector that is displaying your image on a wall, and now you're looking at a screen that is 5 meters wide instead of 1 meter on the computer, you might find that the text is too small or too big. That is all controllable from here, right? I have, for example, a 4K monitor, and when I leave the default settings at 100%, because the monitor is physically so big, it's this giant 45-inch monitor, the text becomes very small, the icons become very small, so I increase it a little bit to make it easier to see. If you have some eyesight issues, this can also help reduce strain on your eye by making everything a bit bigger. So I'll just show you what this does by setting it to the largest, 175, and watch what happens to everything on the screen. Right? Now we haven't changed the resolution. All we did was increase the size of text, apps, and other items. But what you can see is everything is giant, and we've lost screen real estate. So instead of being able to see everything at once now, I've got to scroll down to see all this extra stuff because everything is so big. I'm very lucky. My eyesight is fine. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back down to, let's try 125. Okay, that looks pretty good. But again, for me, I don't even need this. So I'm going to go ahead and set it back to 100%. And for me, this is perfect. The next thing we're going to show is the display resolution. Now, I actually had to record this video twice because I made a mistake on my resolution. The screen that I am actually currently working on isn't 1920 by 1080. It's actually 2560 by 1080, which is still a 1080 Full HD screen, but it's a little bit wider. So essentially, it's a widescreen monitor that allows me to have a little bit more real estate to the left and to the right. Now, the reason I have it not set to that is because when I have it set to that, my screen capture doesn't capture everything on the sides. It only captures the stuff in the middle, 1920 pixels. So right now I've got my monitor set to 1920 by 1080. So what I'm actually looking at is a full screen monitor with 2 black bars on the left and right side. You guys can't see that because I'm only capturing the bit in the middle. And this monitor also features an overdrive system that allows me to up the resolution beyond the actual manufacturer's recommendation. This doesn't actually change the number of pixels in your monitor. It's just kind of like an upscaling effect. I wouldn't go above the recommended resolution in general, and I wouldn't go below 1920 by 1080. Another thing to note is that whatever you're doing here, right, the size and the display resolution is only going to affect the monitor that you have currently selected. So again, normally on the screen up in this area up here, you will have this display. And maybe I'm not seeing it because I only have one display plugged in, and so therefore it doesn't need to show me the displays. But I thought that it usually would show it even if there was only one. Now, you'll notice over here on the right on this sample image that I have that display number 1 is blue and display number 2 is gray. That means that this person has actually clicked on display number 1. And so all the settings he's going to change now are in relation to that display. So you would select the display that you want to change the settings for, and then adjust the settings for that, and so on for the next one. Okay? So that's display resolution. The next is display orientation. This is pretty self-explanatory. In general, landscape is fine. If I was to select landscape flipped, essentially we're telling Windows that I'm using my monitor upside down. And believe it or not, there are some situations in which that could be necessary. For example, if you've suspended your monitor from the ceiling of a display booth and your now image is upside down, you need to flip it. So there's one situation. Portrait means your monitor is standing vertically. And again, believe it or not, there's many situations in which that can be useful. For coding, for writing, for web design, it's often very nice to have a vertically oriented screen, a portrait mode screen. And so some monitor stands will actually allow you to rotate the monitor 90 degrees either way. And so portrait mode would actually rotate the display output by 90 degrees, and then portrait flipped would just rotate it negative 90 degrees in the other direction. And so you can experiment with those and see what they do. A great thing about any of these changes here is that if you change anything that makes your system disappear, like, you know, you make a change and your screen goes black and you can't see anything or do anything, don't worry. All of the changes to display settings will give you a notification pop-up that says, are you sure you want to keep these display settings? If not, we'll go back to the old setting in the next 15 seconds. If you select OK, it'll stay. But if you can't see it, don't touch anything, and in 15 seconds, it'll go back to whatever setting was before. This happens sometimes if you set a display to some sort of strange setup, and now all of a sudden your computer is off and you can't see it and you can't plug anything in, you can't click on anything. Just wait a few seconds and it will automatically go back. It always asks you to confirm changes like this, which is very nice. So now I want to talk about multiple displays, which again is going to be a bit tricky because I don't have multiple displays set up. And so if you do plug in a secondary display and it's not showing up, you can try clicking this detect button and it'll look for displays plugged into your outputs. You also have advanced display settings, which will actually open your current display output and give you information about it. So it'll tell you the make and model number of the monitor and also the device that is doing the output. So in this case, I have a very powerful graphics card that is handling all of my video output to the monitor. And here's kind of the settings for that. If I click on this, I can actually get into the details of this and see even more properties for my particular graphics card. And I can, adjust the refresh rate of the monitor and so on. So this monitor actually goes up to 75 Hertz. I'm not going to do that now, but it is something that it can do. All right. And so you can see more settings in there. If you have multiple monitors, you can cycle through them. Multiple display outputs, you can cycle through them up here, through that drop-down arrow. And now for multiple displays, I'm going to have to go over here to show you these images because I don't have a second screen right now. One of the things that I have commonly seen amongst many of my friends and colleagues is when doing presentations or workshops, they often use this mode, which is called duplicate these displays. Duplicate these displays puts exactly the same thing on both screens, on your main screen and on your presentation screen, whether it's a monitor or a TV, doesn't matter. It duplicates them. Now, there's two problems with this. One, whoever you're showing it to sees everything that you're doing. And so maybe you have private information or messy information or personal information, or you just don't want them to see what you're doing behind the scenes and you only want them to see something else. When you're duplicated, they see everything. So it's a one-to-one duplication of what you're doing. The other downside is that if your two screens' display resolutions are not the same, right? So for example, let's say you have a projector that's old. Maybe it cannot display full HD content. Maybe it can only display HD content in 720 pixels wide. That can happen. And so what happens is, because it needs both of the screens to be the same, is it will actually downsize one of the resolutions to fit the other. And so it can put weird black bars, or it can stretch your image or something. This mode is, for me, useless for the most part. However, there's a few situations in which it's very useful. And that is if you are doing some sort of training workshop or meeting or collaboration where you need people to follow along with what you're doing, right? In a situation where you want them to see, what am I clicking? What button does what's over here? What's over there? If you want them to be able to follow along to learn, then I would use this mode. So when we're doing workshops or staff training workshops, we use duplicate mode so that while I'm doing my work on the computer, I can talk about what I'm doing and they can see a mirror image of what that is happening on the second display. However, for presentations, for workshops, for lectures, for lessons, I would strongly recommend using extend mode. And so Extend mode will basically create a secondary display from your second monitor or projector or TV or whatever it is. And what that means is you can put some things over on one side of your screen and others you can drag all the way over to your second monitor, right? You're not limited to having a duplicate of what you're doing on your first monitor. I will also say that having multiple monitors is the best investment pretty much anybody that works any amount of time on a computer can do. It will make your life so much easier, and it will make your work go so much more smoothly, simply because it gives you more real estate for doing many things at once. And, you know, it's 2020. We all need to be fairly good at multitasking on the computer these days if we want to do our work well. And so if you were writing a report, you could have, you know, on one display, your data gathered. On a secondary display, you could have your outline, and all of that is just over there on the right. And then in your main display is where you're working on your new report. And to the left of that, you've got your pictures that you're going to put into the report or your charts that you're going to put into the report. You don't need to Alt-Tab or, you know, move windows around to try to find what you're working on. You can have it all laid out and just click over to one screen, copy what you need, paste it over there, go over there, find what you need, import it over there. It will change your life. And nobody believes me when I tell them this, but once they start doing it, then they see how valuable it is and they see what they've been missing. Having a secondary monitor for your actual office work is one of the best investments that anybody can make for their project, because it will increase the speed and efficiency and effectiveness of your time. And time is money. You know, we got work to do. You know, we can't be waiting around, you know, looking for stuff on our computer. So it's a really useful investment. Something to note is that if you do set it to extended mode, the layout might be wrong. So for example, you see this little button here that says identify. If you click on that button, it will actually display the number of the display on the current display that you're looking at. And so in this situation, you can see that 1 is to the left and 2 is on the right. However, your current office setup might have 2 on the left for some reason. It just might be how it is. No worries, because you can actually click on this monitor and move it around. So I can't do it right now because, again, I don't have a second monitor plugged in. But if this was live, I'd be able to click here on number 2 and just simply move it over and drag it to the left side of number 1. And then I would have to click apply down here. And then it would go ahead and flash for a second, and it would adjust the layout of the position of the 2 monitors. And once you do that, if I had a window over here, my mouse will now smoothly move across this dividing line in the middle, and I can drag windows back and forth as if it was one giant screen, which is very cool and very useful for work. Sometimes you'll notice that you go to move your mouse, and instead of moving from here directly into monitor number 1, it like jumps and comes from this side. You know, like I might on monitor number 1 to get over to number 2, I might have to go like that, and then from this edge it disappears and comes over here, and that's weird. You know, and I go to this edge here and it gets stuck. It won't do anything. So I have to go like that, and then it jumps to this side and like comes in from there. That's because your monitors are backwards. So you just pick one of them up and put it on the other side on this little area, click apply, and it should be fine. And on that note, you can actually position them however you want. You can put one monitor a bit up to simulate the way it looks on your desk. If it's larger, you can put it on top of each other. You can put one below each other. You can have 3 monitors, 4 monitors. It's totally customizable. You just move them around until they're in the right place. Use the identify to figure out which monitor is which. Detect if it's not working to find the monitor. If you have a wireless smart TV, you can actually connect wirelessly to a smart TV as a secondary monitor. If you want to do a presentation or a workshop or something, this is a great trick. And then when you're ready, you click apply and it should go. Again, there's the change the size. So whichever screen you've selected, you can adjust the size of the text and items on that screen, which is useful if you have a secondary screen that's a different physical size. And just please note that the images shown here are not to the physical dimensions, but to the resolution. So if you had a 1080p monitor and a 4K monitor, this one would look much larger, right? It has nothing to do with the size. Even if they're exactly the same size in the real world, the resolution will determine the shape and size of this image displayed here. And the last thing to see is this little option here, make this my main display. Now, as discussed in the last video on customizing your desktop, you can have a taskbar on every window, on every monitor if you want. However, your system tray, this thing here in the bottom right corner, notification area, and your quick links and Cortana and this multitasking task view button, all of that will only show up on your main display. So whichever one you select and check main display and apply, that one will become your primary display. The other one will then inherit the secondary display monitor characteristic, and you can set it whatever you prefer. For example, if you have a laptop, when you're moving around day to day with just your laptop, obviously that's your main display. But maybe when you sit down in your office, you want, and you plug it into a monitor in your office, maybe you want that monitor to be your main display and the laptop to be the secondary display. No problem. Set the monitor to be your main display, and when you unplug your laptop and go, your laptop will automatically make the laptop monitors its main display, and when you come back and plug it in, without you having to do anything, it'll go, oh, there's my main display, and it'll put the main display back over there. Another thing main display does is if you launch an app that is full screen or that requires running in full screen, it will always launch on your main display, right? So that's what main display really means. All right. I think that covers it up. The only other thing I'll show is that you'll typically have a few other options. For example, you can choose to only show your presentation on monitor number 1. You can choose to only show it on monitor number 2. Again, you could hit apply after each one. And that might be useful if for whatever reason, you really want the laptop screen to be off and you only want the secondary screen to be operating. So there's some situations in which that might make sense. And I think that summarizes it for displays and resolutions and customizing that. Graphic settings, yeah, you can see what this says, but this is only going to apply for people that have computers with dedicated graphics cards. Everything that we've just talked about, again, these are all things, these are just little tips and tricks that you guys should be familiar with should you need to use them. And of course, again, everything that we're doing with these videos is just designed to give people working in conservation or science education a little bit more awareness and familiarity with the tips and the tools that you can use with your computer that everybody should be familiar with. And this can help make your presentations look better. This can help keep your desktop clean and organized. This can help you find what you need or launch what you need in a better way, set up your workspace in a way that is comfortable and efficient for you. That's what this is all about.